welcome to another episode of Gossip Finance, where I am your host, Alacius Inger.
And I'm Duncan Sandlin. How's everybody today? How are you, Lacey?
I'm absolutely fabulous, and I am ready to dive into Republicans Gone Crazy and other financial stuff.
Fun. So we're going to do some of the Trump tax cuts expire next year. We'll cover some of what that means and how they don't really have a plan. Trump doesn't have a plan on what to do. Then there's been a lot of the hurricanes in the East Coast that have been really devastating. A lot of people have died, lost their home. But the Republicans have been trying to lie about it because they think it's going to help them in the election, that it's just causing more problems. And this is going to lead to more Jewish space laser theories. So we'll cover those and Marjorie Greene. We'll cover Mike Johnson still trying to thread the needle on election denial, Vance, his problems from the debate, and then Jack Smith had sealed new documents, or the Judge Chutkan did in the January 6th case. So we've got new revelations about all the actual crimes Trump was doing during January 6th to try and overthrow the election. He basically admitted it. But we'll do that. And then, of course, for fun, we got to cover the Trump Dave Ramsey interview. So we'll do that at the end here.
I mean, what did we do to deserve that?
I know.
It's like it was like they did that just to like put a little bow on a nice little present for you and
right.
I.
Two people that we really dislike in a room together, sucking each other off. It's gonna be great. Anyway.
Oh boy. Okay.
Oh, it's pathetic. Anyway, let's go ahead and dive in with the Trump tax cuts. Trump's biggest thing that he did while he was president was the tax cuts, mostly for the rich. But
the tax cuts.
Right. It added trillions and trillions of dollars to the deficit and the debt. But it was a big tax giveaway for the wealthy. But a lot of these exceptions that were put in there are going to expire, which means a lot of our taxes are going to go up next year unless something's done about it. We covered kind of Kamala Harris's plan, because if you don't let them expire, you're not going to raise enough tax revenue for the government because it's down right now. So you have to find some way to raise more revenue, but you don't want to bleed out the middle class now that we're recovering from COVID. So Kamala's got a plan. Trump and his team don't really have a plan. Now here's Jason Smith, who's the Ways and Means chair for Trump, and he's on Squawk Box, and David Pakman covered this, and they're asking about what are you going to do about this, because you got to find a way to raise more revenue, but how are you going to solve this plan where taxes are going to go up on everybody if you don't do this? And how are you going to make a difference?
I can't wait to hear this, because I got to tell you, Trump's tax cuts, do you know what they did 4/2 me?
Nothing.
So everyone was like, yay, we're going to get more money in our paychecks. And this more money in our paychecks was $30 for me, okay? $30 more in my paycheck. And I was like, $30? I live in New York City. Yeah. $30 is like, at best, like one happy hour, you know?
And we got taxed.
But at the end of the year, I owed money in taxes, and it was 3 times the amount I had owed the previous year. Right. I owed a little the previous year. I'm now in a position where I typically owe a little, but I owed 3 times the amount, and it's basically been that way ever since. So Trump's tax cuts cost me a ton.
Well, yeah, they've screwed a lot of people, and we'll go into that in a second. But the question is how are you guys gonna extend these cuts? And if you do, how are you gonna thread the needle on making enough money that you don't drive up the debt again? Because Trump drove up the debt $8 trillion. He drove up the debt more than any 2 other presidents combined in 4 years. So we're going to go through this because it's just crazy. But this is the answer. Get ready to be woefully disappointed.
Detail. In taxes. But how would you pay for extending the tax cuts and getting rid of the SALT cap?
We're going to have to look at everything. I think whenever you're looking
That's a big number, though. Is it not? What would the number be?
So first of all, how will you pay for it? We will look at everything. Okay, that's not really an answer.
You got rid of the SALT cap and you extended the tax cuts. It's trillions of dollars, isn't it, over 10 years?
It's about $900 billion over 10 years is the SALT cap elimination. You're looking at $4.6 trillion worth of unpaid for tax expirations that we have to address. So we have to look at everything. Everything is on the table.
You think tariffs can pay for that? Are you?
I think we're going to have to look at absolutely everything. There's not one thing that can pay for $4.6 trillion.
Like what, though? Do Republicans aren't willing to raise taxes anywhere?
Well, I think there's hundreds of billions of dollars out there that the administration has tried to use for student loans. I also believe if you codify various aspects of the 301 tariffs, that can raise a lot of money in the hundred.
Okay, he believes that is bullshit. First off, the student loan thing, there's not trillions of dollars there. There just isn't. Okay? Because right now, we run at a deficit on student loans because of the cost to administer the loans. The government makes less back than what it put out, and that's already paid for on the balance sheet. So it doesn't affect the actual balance sheet in any real sense. Plus, the money the government does get from student loan payments, we then deduct those from our taxes. So they're not getting taxed on any of that money either. So it doesn't really offset the balance here. So there's not trillions of dollars there in student loans. And the forgiveness for student loans didn't actually hurt the government anything. It actually saved the government money over the 10-year period. In the 1 or 2 year period it costs, but over a 10-year period the government's saving a lot on administrative costs. So that's all bullshit. And extending the 301 tariffs, that's not going to do shit. Because we've explained last time, if a tariff works, nobody pays it. They just buy domestically.
Okay, not to mention, can we just throw out the simple fact that he didn't actually say anything?
No.
Because the question has been posed to him several times. They've posed, okay, how? Okay, by doing what? Okay, by making the cut where, right?
Right.
By increasing it where? You know, like, he's not saying where they want to cut, where they want to increase it. Like, oh, well, the money's just, I mean, we're going to look at all the things and it's going to be somewhere.
Right.
Somewhere is where the money is.
Yeah. Over the rainbow.
Well, no, we want to know where you're going to raise and cut, because we want to know if that applies to our wallets.
Right. So that's all horseshit. I mean, they don't have a plan. He's just sort of spinning wheels here. I have another clip from this. Yeah, so here's the second part of this. I just wanted to go through it, because this is, they did this on Squawk Box, and Squawk Box is, they're okay. They lean pretty right-wing, but this is just, I mean, I'd be hammering this guy really hard about, what do you mean it's all on the table? I mean, that's a scary thing to say. Oops.
Because there is no way in a cap on salt. Because there is no way in a Republican House of Representatives that you can pass an unlimited salt deduction.
So what kind of number do you think
Higher
that'll
cap
be?
or a lower cap than where it is now?
I would say definitely a higher cap. There's going to have to be some wiggle room. If you look at the salt cap that was passed in 2017, it had a marriage penalty. Republicans are supposed to be the party of families.
All right, so listen, the bottom line here is they have no idea.
So let me get into that. He's right. They have no freaking clue what they're doing. So here's what happened. And let me explain what's happening down the pipeline. So here's the Brookings Institute. They just get a real brief. Which provisions of the Tax Cut and Jobs Act expire in 25? This is Trump's big signature bill. The only real thing he did as president. So as they go through the Tax Cut and Jobs Act, which are the most significant expiring provisions? We're just going to skip to this part. The standard deduction, okay? Now, the TCJ increased the standard deduction and eliminated personal exemptions. What does that mean? That means this. For example, if the TCJ expires under the current law, the standard deduction for a married couple will be approximately $16,525. So if you're married, that's your standard deduction. You don't have to pay tax on that first amount of your money, $16,525. Well, the personal exemption will be about $5,725. Okay? So that's if it expires. Okay? Individuals will get to deduct 5,275 off the top of their income. Married couples will get 16. If the provision of the TCJA were extended, if they extend this tax cut for the standard deduction through 2026, the standard deduction would be roughly 30,725 for married couples, and it would be 0 for singles. That's what it is now. Right now, if you're single, you don't get that personal exemption or deduction. They took that away. It's only for married couples, and married couples get 30,000. So it really sort of targeted out and overtaxed people who are single. Which, let's be fair here, who does that mostly affect? That mostly affects millennials, Gen Z, and Gen Alpha, because fewer and fewer of us are getting married because of the cost of getting married. So you're overtaxing younger people.
Or getting married older than generations before us.
Right.
I have gone to really quite a few weddings in recent years of people who were in their late 30s,
40s.
And early to mid 40s, and it was first marriages,
Right.
not even second marriages, getting married for the first time. So that does, that
Right.
age is sort of bumping up.
But that was the scam to that. What we're going to do is we're going to overtax younger people, and we're going to overtax people that live in urban areas. That was the whole strategy here, which comes to some of this stuff. Individual income tax rates, they cut it down from the top from 39.6 to 37. That'll increase again. So all
Just pause a second. On the standard deduction, though, I want to remind people, because it's probably been a really long time since you've had your taxes done under the old rules, ever since the Trump cuts, right?
Right.
You used to get personal exemptions that you're not getting. So while the standard deduction is lower, you also got a personal exemption which added to it under
Right.
the old rules.
That's what that is, yeah.
So I just want to reiterate that it's rearranging how things are, but Republicans will try to make it look more alarming than it is because those personal exemptions, they're different than a standard deduction, but they kind of add into that total that you don't have to
Right.
pay taxes on.
Right.
So there's more to it than that, and I want to point that out because that little piece of information can be used in a very misleading way.
Right. Mm-hmm.
If nobody brings up the personal exemption. So if you hear people talking about, but the standard deduction is going to change, you got to bring up the personal deduction because that makes a huge difference.
Right. There are no personal exemptions now to speak of. They cut almost all of them. So
correct.
On top of cutting this
code has that.
Yeah, on top of cutting the standard deduction for singles. So this is really devastating because let's say you're head of household and you're a single parent. You don't get the personal exemption and you don't get the standard deduction. You just get the one head of household deduction. So it ended up hurting single parents and people who are single, which is mostly younger people. We raised taxes on them to cut them on older people. That was the whole trick to it. That was the whole scam. Anyway, the individual income tax rates will go up again for all of us, not just the top, but all of us. This was the one they were talking about. This is the one Trump's been talking about, cutting the SALT deduction. Or not cutting it, but expanding the SALT deduction. So SALT is basically state and local taxes. So for all my state and local taxes that you pay, me, you, anybody else, we get to deduct some of that from the federal taxes, from our income on federal taxes. So the feds don't charge us tax on that money. What they did was they capped that to $10,000. Now, that doesn't really affect most people who live in rural areas or red states. But if you live in an urban area or a blue state, you pay a lot more in state and local taxes. Because you're paying transit taxes, you're paying for other utilities and things like that. So it's a much higher amount of tax you pay. But you don't get to deduct anything past $10,000. So that was just to hurt urban areas and tax us more money. It didn't really affect a lot of, suburban and rural areas, but it affected people that live near or in cities. So that's what that was. Trump's talking about expanding that because of that they brought in a lot of money, but at the same time it hurt a lot of people, and it doesn't help him out. I don't know that he's going to expand that, but they've talked about raising the cap, and that's what he was talking about. That child tax credit, the TCJA did increase the child tax credit for children under 17 from 1,000 to 2,000, and that's not adjusted for inflation. The maximum credit can be refunded increased from $1,000 to $1,400 per child in 2018. That is adjusted inflation and is a set of $1,700 in 2024. The TGA also increases income thresholds at which the credit phases out. So the child tax credit will fall back to $1,000. Now, on top of that fact, the expansion of the child tax credit that they did during COVID brought 20 million something children out of poverty. The fact that we have that many in the United States, but we pretty much eliminated child poverty by expanding that credit. The Republicans, with Joe Manchin's vote in the Senate, reversed all that. So that extended whatever it was, $3,000 a year that they were divvying out at like $5 or whatever it was, a few $100s a month, right? $600 a month, whatever it was. It wasn't even that much. It was a few $100s a month, but that was cut. Well, Kamala Harris has proposed, I want to bring back the child tax credit, but I want to make it $6,000 a year, which is $500 a month per kid. And that will basically eliminate child poverty. And it really doesn't cost it that much in the net scheme of things. So there was that. Small business deduction. The TCJA provided a 20% deduction for qualified pass-through income for sole proprietors. Partnerships and S corporates with the TCJA expires. This deduction will no longer be available. The pass-through doesn't apply to a lot of businesses. It does to some, but not very many. What Harris has proposed is let that expire, but what we'll do because we want to encourage startups, because this helps establish businesses more than it does starting new businesses. But she said we're going to help startups, so the first $50,000 of income your new company makes, if you start a new company or a small business, that first $50,000 of income is not taxable at all. So that'll help a lot of business, because most businesses fail within the first 2 to 7 years. And the part of the problem is that's having to pay for all the expenses, and taxes are a huge expense on a small business. You'd be surprised how much small business owners pay in tax. It's a lot of freaking money. It is a lot. So a $50,000 windfall would help a lot of people succeed where they'd otherwise fail. Because a lot of people, they think they did okay for the year, and then they turn around and they owe a $20,000 tax bill. Then it eats away at their business. So those are just some of the things. They changed the AMT and the estate tax. But what are you going to do? Because now all that revenue has been gone for the last several years. It's jacked up the debt, right? If that expires, taxes are going to go up on everybody, which is going to slow the economy, and it's going to be pretty dramatic. So we have to find some way to balance that out. Harris has proposed a plan to raise revenue, but it involves taxing the wealthy, people who already have a lot of money. And we're talking about people that make over $400,000 a year. That's who she's going to take it from. People that have hundreds of millions of dollars in the market. That's who she wants to take it from. So she wants to tax the wealthy, lessen the income inequality and wealth inequality in order to pay for all this and pay down the debt and the deficit and be able to provide all the services we need and end child hunger and all that. So that's her strategy. Their strategy is, we have to look at it. We don't know. So, vote for what you want there. Because they can't say what they really want to do is, well, we're not going to tax the rich. We'll just run the deficit and the debt up. And we'll just bleed up poor people.
I think they can't say that.
Yeah, they're not going to say that. So that's it. That's the Trump tax strategy going forward. Just so you guys were aware of it. But moving on to the news. So the big news this week's been the hurricanes. Helene was there, and now I forget the new one coming in. Ravaged Georgia, Florida, the southeast of the United States. It's been terrible. I think it's like, I can't remember what the death toll was. It's a bunch. It's like 200 people. And people lost homes. It's just been really horrible. But don't worry, everybody. The government's they are on it. The Republicans, governors and stuff that are in most of those states are really happy with the government response. Things have been going well, except for Republicans like Trump and some of the guys in the House are running on this platform of saying it's a conspiracy theory and the government's not doing what it's supposed to be doing. And in fact, the government caused the hurricane. The Democrats caused the hurricane. And this is causing more problems and depleting resources, and this is why it's an issue. So this is Rachel Maddow. We're going to watch a couple clips from her real quick, but she covered this, and it's freaking insane. But this was all over the news.
For political benefit, right? Sure, 6 different states coping with devastation from a hurricane less than 2 weeks ago. And another storm on the way that is so large and terrifying, it is bringing meteorologists to tears. Trump campaign sees that and thinks, what better time than to mess with people? What better time is there than this? Because maybe we'll benefit from it. Maybe if people are pushed into the most extreme circumstances possible, maybe we'll benefit from things being as bad as they can possibly be. The Harris campaign just tonight has released a new ad pushing back at the lies that Trump and his campaign have been trafficking in about the hurricane response. Also reminding the country that this was not exactly his strong suit while he was in the White House in charge of efforts like this.
So this is the ad. So they've been saying that things are bad. They haven't responded. All the Republican governors have been saying, no, they've responded. Everything's great. We have what we need. You know, it's just, well, you can't do much about this, the hurricane. This is the ad that they've pushed to push back on this. And it goes back to, remember what it was like when Trump had hurricanes, because he had several while he was president, and how he didn't hardly do shit. And that's what this is to remind you of, what it was like when he was president.
This ad has just come out.
And these things happen.
I worked in the Trump administration.
Never in a million years did I ever think that I'd be working in the White House with a president that didn't care about the American people.
He would suggest not giving disaster relief to states that hadn't voted for him.
I remember one time after a wildfire in California, he wouldn't send relief because it was a Democratic state. So we went as far as looking up how many votes he got in those impacted areas to show him these are people who voted for you. This isn't normal. The job of the president is to protect Americans, regardless of politics.
If Trump's elected again, there'll be no one to stop his worst instincts. You'll have yes men help him implement Project 2025's agenda. Unchecked power, no guardrails.
They will be serving one man. I am voting for Kamala Harris because she will put the safety and security of every American first, whether they voted for her or not.
Again, that is just released.
So those are officials in the Trump administration who had to respond to hurricanes and stuff when he was president, saying he didn't do shit. We had to convince him these people voted for him to even want to give aid.
Right. Right. Who does that?
Sick people.
I don't know that any Democrat or Republican before that has ever had that problem. They just send the aid.
Nope. So let's look at some of the disinformation they've been spreading, because this is fucking nuts.
On top of everything else, a tidal wave of disinformation and conspiracy theories designed to maximize the chaos and turn people against each other and reap whatever political points can be wrung out of it. I mean, amid everything else, here's the front page of the Winston-Salem Journal in North Carolina. Their front page, all columns above the fold headline, fighting misinformation. It's the last thing you think they'd have to be dealing with, given everything else they're dealing with. Hurricane Helene triggers misinformation surge. In Charlotte, North Carolina, here's the editorial board of the Charlotte Observer. Shame on Donald Trump for worsening North Carolina's Helene tragedy with political lies. FEMA has had to make a whole section of its website devoted to debunking false conspiracy theories and disinformation about the hurricane and the response that have been spread, among other people, by the Republican candidate for president of the United States. The North Carolina Department of Public Safety, again, with everything else they have to deal with, they have also had to make a fact versus rumor new website to help people sort through the trash that is being promoted for political benefit. I mean, back in reality, among people actually involved in the response, North Carolina's governor has called the federal response to Helene, quote, unprecedented. North Carolina Republican Senator Tom Tillis says he's impressed with the federal response. He says he is proud of the response effort, that they're doing a great job. A Republican state senator in North Carolina who represents Western North Carolina, he's posted a public plea, quote, friends, can I ask a small favor? Will you all help stop this conspiracy theory junk that's floating all over Facebook and the internet about the floods in Western North Carolina? Example, FEMA is stealing money from donations, body bags ordered, but government has denied, bodies not being buried. Government is controlling the weather from Antarctica. Government is trying to get lithium from Western North Carolina. Stacks of bodies left in hospitals, and on and on and on. He says, quote, please help stop this junk. It is just a distraction to people trying to do their job. Folks, this is a catastrophic event of which this country has never known. It is the largest crisis event in the history of North Carolina. The state is working nonstop. DOT has deployed workers from all over the state. Duke Power has 10,000 workers on this. FEMA is here. The National Guard is here in large numbers. And he goes on.
So here's the thing. So Trump is thinking, oh, this will help if I say, look how bad things are because of this hurricane and Biden's not doing a good job. It'll help me in my poll numbers. What happens is by spreading these conspiracies that they're not doing their job, they're not giving aid, they're not doing this stuff, people then think the aid isn't there and they don't go seek it out. And then FEMA and the federal government and the local state governments and the National Guard have to spend more time and money and resources to combat the misinformation, to make sure people can get the help they need.
God, on top of it, it's just disgusting.
And people die because of this shit.
It's so gross to like utilize this sort of thing and then try to spread this extra fear that is totally out there, you know, just to gain some political points here. And then look, this senator is a Republican. Look at that little R behind his name.
Yeah.
He's a Republican. He's even having to go on here and be like, listen, you guys are not helping.
Right. He's begging people.
That's the thing. You're not helping.
How bad is it when you have to beg members of your own party to shut the fuck up and let this go through? But this got bled out into the news. So here's CNN. I got this from Brian Tyler Cohen, and we'll watch a couple clips from him on this. This is the bullshit that they were spreading. And this guy was combating it on CNN, and it's ridiculous that we have to fight about this. We should be fighting about how are we going to get these people aid. Or we should be assisting the government. We shouldn't be arguing about what's real and what isn't.
It's not true.
In a large number
why'd you
of
say
the
it's
federal
not true?
budget.
Survivors are going to get tens of thousands of dollars.
One second.
So why did you lie just now?
No, what I'm saying is this. I'm putting the point in this. When people are talking
why'd you
of
say
money
it?
in the billions of dollars.
But you screwed up.
She made the point that it was $750 a family. It might end up being
on the first day.
Brian, I'm not saying money will not reach it. I'm saying what the political reality is. People in North Carolina are upset. They see tons of money going elsewhere, and there isn't an immediate reaction from the federal government. That's all I'm saying.
There's not an immediate reaction?
It's not
FEMA's
big
been there
enough
for a
for
week.
what's going on. It happened 5 days ago. We should have helicopters in the sky of the United States
They've
military.
been there. They've been there for several days now.
Brian, that is completely not the story that people are hearing.
You're
through
right
social
that what
media
people are seeing on social media is false. You're absolutely right that the lies on social media are distorting people's minds. That's true.
We have countless people missing, okay? There is billions of dollars going to every which way like I said, migrants, and this is fine. We can have the debate about all those separate
richest country on earth.
What I am saying is, when a disaster like this happens, the response needs to be immediate and overwhelming.
And you're saying it hasn't
people
been.
do not
So you're
feel
alleging
it's
the
that
government's
way.
been
No,
incompetent.
I'm not.
Okay, but can we?
I'm trying to tell you that.
But see, that's the bullshit that's going on. He's trying to say the response hasn't been good enough. But then he's also admitting, but we're also lying about how the response wasn't good enough with misinformation on Facebook. But the response still wasn't good enough. So he's doubling down. He admits to lying, and then he doubles down on the lie. It's fucking psychotic. People are dying. And these are the games they're playing to try and get points. It's fucking crazy. Right? So here's Brian Tyler Cohen. We're going to watch one more clip from him on this, because that was his clip too. But this is the last part of it I just wanted to watch.
respond to criticism. FEMA has been in these states since even before the storm hit. Of his call with Biden, Republican Georgia Governor Brian Kemp said, and I told him, we got what we need. We will work through the federal process. He offered that if there's other things we need, just to call him directly, which I appreciate that. But we've had FEMA embedded with us since, a day or two before the storm hit. A day or two before the storm hit. In fact, there's a raft of Republican officials heaping praise onto the federal government.
I just spoke, the president just called me yesterday afternoon. I missed him and called him right back. And he just said, hey, what do you need? And I told him, we got what we need. We'll work through the federal process. He offered that if there's other things we need, just to call him directly, which I appreciate that. But
we have been, Sean, I have to say, working well with FEMA. They, in fact, were moving very quickly over the last few days for us, and getting these resources has been critically important.
I'm incredibly appreciative of the rapid response and the cooperation from the federal team at FEMA. I've been on the phone over the weekends with the senior FEMA administrator. The team has been deployed. We had our declaration of emergency processed an expedited way over the weekend and was finalized yesterday.
I too want to thank the entire team. I mean, our communities, our citizens in the communities are certainly very resilient, as the governor stated. Our private partners, volunteers, I mean, obviously our local, our state, and our government and our federal government all working together. Just a lot of hard work going on just across the state. This storm left a tremendous amount of devastation. But the response efforts by all involved have been phenomenal.
In fact, the people who are spreading...
So that's the thing. And he goes into to explain. These are mostly Republicans, Republican governors, saying these wonderful things. Saying FEMA was here early. National Guard was here. We have what we need. And even after we had what we needed, the president called us personally and said, do you need anything else? You never heard shit like that when Trump was president. Never fucking called the states personally. He showed up in California, whatever, weeks after the wildfires and talked about, we need to rake the floors. And that was his solution. We need to rake the floors of the forest. You mean the ground? What do you call the sky? The ceiling of the earth. He's just a fucking idiot, dude. I mean, and he doesn't care. And they don't care.
Well, you know what? Trump has brought a new era of Republican into the light because, honestly, pre-Trump, any president from any side would send the aid.
Right, because they wouldn't want to look incompetent.
They're not really going to argue too much with a natural disaster that suddenly happened. They just send the aid. People from both sides just send the aid. Trump is this sort of new era of maybe we don't have to. They didn't vote for me. Not enough of them voted for me.
Yeah. Well, it's built up for a long
time. So this is a natural disaster and people are pulling vote logs to try to convince the president to take care of the people.
Well, it built up for a long time. A lot of the racists were underground for a while there, but that was Trump's whole thing, is saying Obama's not a real American. The immigrants aren't real Americans. These people aren't real Americans. And when they say that, it's just code for they're not white. So they shouldn't have equal rights. That's part of what they're doing. That's part of the game they're playing here. But why does this conspiracy, where did this start out? It started out with a bunch of shit online, but one of the biggest offenders was Marjorie Taylor Greene. Started some of these conspiracy theories online, on Twitter, and she picks them up from other sources. But here's the deal: you remember years ago she said the California wildfires were started by Jewish space lasers? Get ready for the sequel: Space Laser 2: Electric Boogaloo with Marjorie Taylor Greene. I am not fucking with you. This is real.
Tonight, we're looking into a story getting a lot of buzz in the last 24 hours. It claims Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene is implying Democrats caused Hurricane Helene to harm Republicans. And folks, this one is true. Last night, Greene wrote on X, quote, "Yes, they can control the weather. It's ridiculous for anyone to lie and say it cannot be done." While she didn't say exactly who they are, the post came just hours after Greene posted this map showing the political lean of the areas impacted by the hurricane. And as you can see, there is definitely more red than blue. Greene has pushed many conspiracy theories in the past, including some which have been called anti-Semitic. If you would like to submit a question to us, just go to 10news.com and click on fact.
So, yep, she started spreading these rumors that they can control the weather. Who's they? The Democrats, the Jews, probably the Jews. It's always been the Jews with her. She's an anti-Semite. She's one of those QAnon nutbags. And those guys are all anti-Semites. But
oh my gosh.
Wait, this is part of what she tweeted. So I'm pretty sure this is no, let me do this clip first. So I want to talk about, because this is her on climate change, and this is just to give you a sense of the Republican Party. They're big climate deniers, but how many of these massive once-in-a-century storms have we had in the last, 8 to 10 years? Like a dozen? And they still do this climate change denial shit. They're still yelling about electric vehicles. So here's this, here's this clip here. From, this is Alex Wagner on MSNBC.
Republican Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene delivered this very interesting take on climate change.
This is an older clip, by the way.
People are not affecting climate change. You're going to tell me that back in the Ice Age, how much taxes did people pay and how many changes did governments make to melt the ice? The climate is going to continue to change.
Did woolly mammoths pay taxes? Yeah, exactly. They drove diesel trucks, too. What? The same day, over on the Senate side, another Republican, Wisconsin's Ron Johnson, suggested the climate crisis could be a good thing because Wisconsin is cold. And so if climate change makes it warmer, then why wouldn't we take comfort in that?
There's also the party that, remember, they said, hey, there isn't climate change because it's snowing outside, and the guy brought a snowball into the Senate to prove that climate change wasn't happening. They've switched. They switched from the climate isn't changing to, okay, it's changing, but it's not man-made. And that's been their dialogue recently. But the funny thing about it is, I've had this discussion so many... Go ahead.
What does Marjorie Greene think is happening? Like, the government is identifying who it is or is not paying what, and then they go out there with the blow dryers or something to, like, melt ice to like... What on God's green earth does she think is happening?
Well, these scientists have explained this, and it's very clear, which is, yeah, the climate does always change. We're on the crust of a cooling planet. There's going to be tectonic shifts. There's going to be different events that happen. But you're talking over scales of hundreds of thousands of years, or millions of years, right? When they're talking about that. Now they're talking about, we're seeing rapid overall average temperature growth on the planet, and massive climate changes and more devastating storms and crop losses and lives lost and diseases that are evolving from the new environment that's being created. And we're seeing it at a much more rapid pace in spans of like 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, not hundreds of thousands to millions. That's what they're talking about. And yeah, you can make changes there, just by how we behave and how much shit we put in the air and how much trash we throw out. But that's the thing. But here's John Iadarola, because he's my Marjorie Taylor Greene whisperer on his show, The Damage Report, because he actually takes the time to go through her Twitter feed, which, frankly, kids, we're not going to do. We're not going to spend that much time on Twitter. But here
Besides,
it
you don't want to have to take that much aspirin to calm the headache that it would give you to try to read all of her crap.
Yeah, we don't have a Twitter page. just to give you a hint, the show does not have a Twitter page. We don't care. But that's what we have John for. John's going to explain to us what she's been posting on Twitter. And it's fun. It's a doozy, everybody.
Lasers, ... CBS 9 years ago talked about lasers controlling the weather. And it's just a screen that says.
So this is her justification. There was an interview on CBS 9 years ago about lasers controlling the weather. This is what she's talking about. This is her interview. And here it is. It's an interview with Michio Kaku. And he talks about this, and they were experimenting with this.
I mean, lasers? Really? To change the weather?
That's right. Well, as Mark Twain once famously said, everyone complains about the weather, but no one ever does anything about it. Well, instead of doing a rain dance, we physicists are firing trillion-watt lasers into the sky to actually precipitate rain clouds and actually bring down lightning bolts. The bad news is, if it's a clear blue sky, it's not going to do anything at all, because it only takes water vapor that's already in the air and condenses it. However, for floods, for agriculture, farmers, for people planning wedding parties, football games, you name it, outdoor events and agriculture and flooding and even hurricanes, all of them could be subject to weather modification.
So,
okay, so yes.
Here's what he's talking about, and here's where they took it. He's talking about you can't create weather in that sense. What you can do is prevent certain things from happening by condensing the water in the rain clouds, in the clouds, to rain earlier. So let's say hurricane is brewing over the ocean, right? Theoretically, and we don't have this technology yet. They're still experimenting with it and playing with it. Theoretically, we could send a bunch of ships out there to fire these trillion-watt lasers at the clouds to get them to precipitate more of the water over the ocean before it hits land, so the hurricane's not as devastating. We could prevent floods from happening by precipitating a lot of the water out of the rain, or out of the cloud, getting it to rain over areas that aren't, subject to flooding. We could spread out the rain a little bit more. That's all he's talking about. But she thinks that there's some conspiracy where they can make a hurricane with lasers. Like this is a fucking Superman comic book, and Lex Luthor's out there fucking making hurricanes to try and up his real estate value. I mean, it's just weird shit. But that's where this is going. So it's all the fucking nutbags take it and run with it. And if you guys want to know how crazy this shit is, I talked to my mother the other day. She's like, I talked to your grandmother, and your grandmother's telling me that they created the hurricane. So even my 90-year-old grandmother heard this shit and spewed it out. You still there, Lacey? Oh, there you go. God. So yeah.
Oh my.
That's how fucking far these conspiracy things travel. It's psychotic. So, just crazy stuff. That's what's going on with her. I got one more from John Idarola. We're going to move on to this, though. So, they had the debate with Tim Walz and J.D. Vance. It was the vice presidential debate, which doesn't really matter that much. It was pretty much a push. They said it was kind of a tie. Maybe J.D. did a little bit better. Didn't really matter because Tim Walz did a lot better with undecided voters in the post-debate polls. And his likability went up a lot more. But he did catch J.D. Vance in some stupid stuff, which we'll get into in a second. But this leads to this. It brought up this whole issue about Trump and the January 6th situation, and did Trump try to steal the election and try to overthrow our democracy? Basically commit treason, right? J.D. Vance wouldn't answer the question. We're going to get into this a little bit later, too. All this new information about the January 6th case got released in the D.C. case, where pretty much Mike Pence and a bunch of other people in the Trump administration said, oh yeah, it was his plan from the get-go. He knew he lost. He tried to overthrow the election. He knew, right? So all that information got released after J.D. Vance lied. Now Mike Johnson's trying to play cleanup. So we're going to start with Mike Johnson, then we'll go backwards and see why Mike Johnson's panties are in such a twist right here. But Mike Johnson's really, really panicking here. So here's John Idarola on the damage report again. But man, this was just hilarious to me.
Take a look.
Mr. Speaker, you just said Democrats are. You said their rhetoric is inciting. We all just saw what both President Trump, former President Trump, and his son Eric said. Eric actually did specifically reference Democrats. He said they tried to kill him, and it's because the Democratic Party, they can't do anything right. Do you support those comments or not?
I don't know what Eric was saying because I only heard just a snippet there. I don't know the context.
You just saw it,
Eric
sir.
is very level-headed and a very intelligent person. I saw your clip of it, George. I didn't see the full speech. We need to all look at these things in full context.
So you're actually repeating the charge. And I don't know what more context you need. Here's exactly what Eric Trump said. They tried to smear us. They came after us. They impeached him twice. And then, guys, they tried to kill him. They tried to kill him. And it's because the Democratic Party, they can't do anything right. What more context do you need? Do you support that statement or not?
George, I'm not going to parse the language of what people say at rallies. I could give you pages and pages of crazy comments by the leading Democrats in this country.
So it's very clear you're not going to condemn the baseless suggestion the Democrats are behind the assassination attempt on Donald Trump. I want to ask you another question.
Okay, so you know he's lying when he says your name 3 times. George. I'm about to bullshit you.
No, that's a delayed tactic. I'm trying to collect my thoughts, so I just keep repeating a phrase.
What's so funny though? So like this was part of what incited some of this shit, and part of what incited the insurrection stuff is that the Democrats are cheating, right? And they're doing this shit again. They're cheating now. They tried to impeach him. They're trying to criminalize him and all this stuff. It's like no, that's not the Democrats. So the impeachment was partly the Democrats, but he also did impeachable crimes, and he got impeached twice. Just the Senate didn't want to vote on it because Mitch McConnell didn't want to hear it. Right? They had the opportunity to end all this shit right then, but they didn't because they pussied out. Now you're in this situation where they're asking him, so wait a minute, he's saying that the Democrats tried to assassinate Trump when we know that both those shooters were independent guys and both of them were Trump voters, or at least the second one was. They weren't Democrats. They weren't aligned with the Democrats. And furthermore, don't you think the Democratic Party, if it wanted to kill somebody, could probably pull it off? Do you think they'd send a couple of freaking nutbags with AR-15s? No. So, it's all horseshit, but they're trying to spin it because they want to rile up the base, which is going to create violence during the election, is what they want. And they're hoping that they can push that sort of narrative and maybe skew the election or steal it. It's just insane stuff like that. But here's the second clip I wanted to watch from Mike Johnson. And this is the part where they ask, do you think Trump stole the election? And he's going to give basically the same answer. Well, no, I'm not going to say anything. I can't say anything.
Can you say unequivocally that Joe Biden won the 2020 election and Donald Trump lost?
See, this is the game that is always played by mainstream media with leading Republicans. It's a gotcha game. You want us to litigate things that happened 4 years ago when we're talking about the future. We're not going to talk about what happened in 2020. We're going to talk about 2024 and how we're going to solve the problems for the American people. I think this game that's played all the time, I'm not going to engage in it. We're not talking about that. Joe Biden has been the president for almost 4 years. Everybody needs to get over this and move forward. That's what we need to talk about. What happens on November 5 and the days after that? That's important, and that's what the demand for us to talk about.
So, like Senator Vance, you cannot say unequivocally that Joe Biden won the 2020 election and Donald Trump lost?
George, I'm the Speaker of the House. I work with the President of the United States all the time. Joe Biden has been the president for 4 years. There's not a question about this, okay? It's already been done and decided, and this is a gotcha game that's played, and I'm not playing it. I want to talk about the future. Let's talk about policies. Ask me anything.
So...
Note, he can't say that Biden won.
No, just that he is the president. I'm saying he's the president. Illegitimately. Because he can't say it. Because he'll lose his base. Because they're nuts. Because they've all been lied to. And so they've been lying for so long, they have to keep up the lie. Instead of just admitting it's all bullshit. Which is what the news wants them to do. But because if you asked them, hey, look, Hillary won in 2016. She got the larger popular vote. And she litigated to whether or not she did lose the Electoral College because it was down to a few thousand votes in like a couple states. And so Hillary might have actually won. Do you think Hillary won the election? He's not going to say, I'm not going to litigate what happened in 20. He's going to say, no, Trump won. But when you ask him that same question about Biden and Trump, he can't answer it. But the answer he gave, well, I'm not going to litigate the past, I'm focused on the future. That was the same answer Vance gave in the debate. And I want to remind everybody of this if you didn't see it. This was the big damning thing that Vance said, where Tim Walz really freaking nailed him to the wall. And I want to just jump into this real quick. So here was this clip from the Tim Walz, J.D. Vance debate where Tim Walz finally nailed it.
Was a threat to our democracy in a way that we had not seen. And it manifested itself because of Donald Trump's inability to say. He is still saying he didn't lose the election. I would just ask that. Did he lose the 2020 election?
Tim, I'm focused on the future. Did Kamala Harris censor Americans from speaking their mind in the wake of the 2020?
I'm focused on the future. That line doesn't work.
Focus on the future. Let me bring up a thing about the past.
Well, how about this? Your girlfriend comes up to you and goes, hey, Duncan, did you sleep with my sister? Look, honey, I'm focused on the future here. I don't want to litigate the past. You think that's going to float?
Well, that's the thing that you say as your last statement as a man who has a girlfriend.
Right? Timmy, did you set the rug on fire? Look, Mom, I'm focused on the future. Watch the rest of this, but that's the lamest fucking answer of all time. And Tim Walz nails him on it.
COVID situation?
That is a damning non-answer.
The VP candidates largely stuck to the issues, shifting.
But he pointed that out, that J.D. Vance, if Trump tried to do it again, J.D. Vance admitted he wouldn't stop him. Like Mike Pence did. Not to say Pence is a hero, but Pence did finally do the right thing in the end. You still there? You kind of froze there for a second.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. It's a little delay, no worries. But yeah, so that was that. Go ahead.
I think yours is having poor. I think you're having poor connection.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll check it out here in a second. But here's J.D. Vance. Pretty much, this is what he got, because he lied a lot, but this is what he finally snapped about being fact-checked.
Thank you, Governor. And just to clarify for our viewers, Springfield, Ohio does have a large number of Haitian migrants who have legal status, temporary protected status.
Well, Margaret, but
thank you, Senator. We have so much to get to.
Margaret, I think it's important because
we're going to turn out of the economy. Thank you,
Margaret. The rules were that you guys weren't going to fact check, and since you're fact checking me, I think it's important to say what's actually going on.
I don't want to go to the rest of it. I just wanted to do that one clip. Hey, I thought we were allowed to lie. What is this fact-checking me shit?
Yeah, that's crazy.
Bitch, what are you doing? Fact-check me. I'm JD. We had that same bit with Lauren Boebert yelling at the NPR reporter about, oh, you're going to fact-check me? And he's like, yeah. It's a journalistic report.
Blatantly making stuff up.
Otherwise, we'd be talking about Jewish space lasers. I mean, you nutball. But all this anyway kind of leads into the bigger thing about J.D. Vance said all that. Mike Johnson's, jumping from one foot to the other. But the day after J.D. Vance said that at the debate, this happened with the January 6th case about Trump trying to overthrow the election in D.C. They have the whole issue where the Supreme Court gave him immunity, but only for official presidential acts. And so Jack Smith, who's prosecuting the case, had to basically say this wasn't an official act. He was running as a candidate. This was not a presidential act. This was him trying to overthrow an election as a candidate, which is not an official presidential act. And so he had to prove it, and the judge, Chutkan, released the 165-page document to the public. And it's extremely damning. So here's a little bit of that.
We're learning previously undisclosed details tonight about former President Donald Trump's efforts to overturn the 2020 election. A newly unsealed 165-page court filing from the Department of Justice argues the former president should still face trial even after the U.S. Supreme Court ruled presidents have immunity for official acts. NPR's Carrie Johnson and former U.S. Attorney Mary McCord are following the latest developments. They join me now. Welcome to you both. So, Carrie, what do we know about why this filing was unsealed now by Judge Tanya Chutkan, and what stood out to you as you made your way through it?
Yeah, the Justice Department made this filing in response to what the Supreme Court did this past summer. The Supreme Court ruled that Trump and future presidents do enjoy substantial immunity from prosecution for official acts. But the special counsel, Jack Smith, and his team maintain that Trump was acting as a political candidate and not the president of the United States when he allegedly attempted to overturn the results of the 2020 election. And this court filing today was filed under seal a short while ago. There's been some back and forth about how much the public should be able to see. And just this afternoon, Judge Tanya Chutkan mostly sided with prosecutors and released this filing with some redactions. There are some new details in here based on grand jury testimony and notes that people like former Vice President Mike Pence took about his interactions with former President Donald Trump.
Uh-oh. Mike Pence took notes about his interactions with Donald Trump. Because when you work for a notorious liar, you probably should be recording or writing down every fucking thing they say or do.
Basically everything.
It would be like,
I wonder how much cloud storage space he's got to pay for.
oh my god, probably a ton. But you know it's bad when it's like Lacey's like, all right, Duncan, I need you to do this to overturn the election, and I'm like, What are you doing, Duncan? Nothing. I demand loyalty, Duncan. Demand loyal.
I mean, you know what? I've often, and I can't pretend that I'm a fan of Mike Pence per se, but I've often felt kind of bad for him because I can't imagine he knew quite the level of whatever he was getting into, you know?
Well, he did ask Dan Quayle if he could overturn the election. They tried to find a way to do it, but the bottom line is in the end he couldn't, and Trump was trying to get him killed, and at that point, I think after that, he decided, you know what, no, I'm not going to do this. Because, I mean, they had gallows out in front of the freaking Capitol building. They're all screaming, hang Mike Pence. Because Trump tweeted that Mike Pence failed them. And right after that, that's when they stormed the Capitol. And it got really violent. And they were screaming, hang Mike Pence. Trump was a part of this. He was watching this whole thing, tweeting shit out. It was coordinated. Mike Pence flat out said, yeah, he basically told me to do this. He knew he lost. Ivanka Trump testified under deposition that after the election, he told her that, yeah, we lost, but it doesn't matter. We're going to have to fight like hell, and we're going to overturn this, basically is what he told her. His own daughter. So the two probably biggest witnesses Jack Smith are going to be Mike Pence and Ivanka, to testify that he knew, he orchestrated it, and he wanted to overthrow the election. Plus, we have lovely evidence from Rudy Giuliani, who butt-dialed a reporter, and he or she got the whole thing recorded of Rudy Giuliani screaming about how he needs money to overturn the voting results in a certain state. And she's got it recorded. Because he butt-dialed her and then was spewing about the conspiracy.
Can you imagine getting butt dialed by him and just being like, whoa, what am I listening to?
Well, the joke's been going around, but for Rudy's sake, everybody, stop giving him your number. Because he does that a lot, where he just accidentally dials people, and then you hear him screaming about shit in the background. He's a nut job. So it's all really bad shit. It's all really terrible. I just want to look at this one brief little article on it, and then we'll wrap it up. But it's really damning. And he's seriously, if he doesn't win the presidency, I'll bet you the Manhattan judge, what's his name, Merchan, for the fraud case, I'll bet you Merchan gives him at least 6 months to a year. And I'll bet you this DC case goes through, and I'll bet you Chutkan gives him 10 or 20 years. Minimum. I don't know why this is being tried as anything other than treason, but still. So, Special Counsel Jack Smith provides fullest picture yet of 2020 election case against Trump in new filing. If you guys haven't read it, you can get it online. I did read it, the whole thing. It's entertaining. It's weird. It's entertaining, though. So, federal prosecutors laid out their most extensive case to date against former President Trump for his efforts to overturn the 2020 election, and a sweeping legal brief that was unsealed Wednesday by a federal judge who was weighing the explosive criminal charges against him. The 165-page document, which lands a week before the election, in which Trump is taking another shot at the White House, offers new details about Special Counsel Jack Smith's investigation of the former president, includes new details of Trump's frayed relationship with Vice President Mike Pence, FBI evidence of Trump's phone usage, so they have all of his phone shit that you can get for January 6th, when rioters overtook the U.S. Capitol, and conversations with family members and others where the then president was fighting his loss to Joe Biden, where he says he admitted he had lost and wanted to fight it. Broadly in response to the Supreme Court's ruling, we skipped that part. Here we go. When the defendant lost the 2020 presidential election, he resorted to crimes to try to stay in office, Smith wrote in the brief, which U.S. District Judge Tanya Chutkan released partially redacted form. So that's basically the accusation. At its core, the defendant's scheme was a private one. Prosecutors wrote he extensively used private actors and his campaign infrastructure to attempt to overturn the election results and operated in a private capacity as a candidate for office. So there's nothing official about this. So if you want to read the rest of this article, it goes through a lot of the evidence. You know, he used his phone. Prosecutors framed Trump conversation with Pence as between running mates, and what he said to Pence. He personally tweeted Pence didn't have the courage to overturn the election. There was at one point where they removed Pence from the Capitol building, or they had him in safety, and one of the aides ran into the dining room where Trump was watching it on TV, which tells you how old he is. What person under the age of 60 watches TV in the dining room? Anyway, they told him, yeah, Mike Pence, they've got him secured, hoping that Trump would say, okay, let's send more people and get him out of there to make sure he's safe. And instead, Trump's response was, so what? To the fact that his vice president might get killed. And they were trying to secure him. So what? I don't care. So, I mean, just damning stuff. So I'm hoping that goes to trial next year. It should have gone to trial already. But too many shenanigans. So
what's so disappointing, though, is really just that, you know, he's allowed to get away with everything.
Well, so far,
a common person would have way harsher results than anything that's handed to him, you know?
Well,
everyone just wants to like skirt the issue and sweep it under the rug. So I hope somebody actually has the audacity to really nail him with something. Yeah. I mean, yeah, he's got all of these felony charges and whatever, but like, how many felonies do you have to have and actually not see the inside of a prison?
Well, that's the point, is if he loses this for him, he's fucked if he loses this. If he loses this election, he owes the state of New York over $500 million now? He owes E. Jean Carroll another, over $100 million now? Because it's been racking up interest. Right? So that's a lot of his money gone. His Trump stock will be worth shit. Because it's the only reason it has any value is because people are hoping he'll win. If he doesn't win, it's worthless. And that's almost all of his fucking wealth right now. The rest of his businesses are underwater. He's in all kinds of legal trouble. And furthermore, like you said, 34 felony counts. He's looking at doing a year in jail, or you're in prison, sorry. And then this goes through. He's looking at spending the rest of his life going between prison and a courtroom. The only way he gets out of this is if he wins the election. If he wins the election, then yeah, and then we all have bigger problems. But if he loses the election, there's nothing protecting him anymore. You think he's going to run in 2028? He'll probably be dead by then.
We can only hope. I know it's not a nice thing to say, but like...
I want to clarify from Lacey's perspective. She doesn't want him to, you to kill him or anything. She's not advocating violence. She's hoping it's natural causes. Right.
I just think that I would not cry if he were to have natural causes, just not wake up one morning and there we go.
Heart attack on the toilet. No, not advocating
I
violence.
was just going to give him a peaceful, in his sleep, he just...
Yeah. No, we're not advocating violence because that's just going to make things worse. So, yeah, no violence against anybody. That just escalates and causes bigger problems. So.
Hey, I'm a teacher. It's my job to say things like, use your words.
Right.
So, yeah.
Use your vote. Well,
those are good words.
Yeah. All right, so we got through dinner. We just ate all over Brussels sprouts there with Trump. So let's take a break, and then you want to jump into dessert?
Yep.
All right, Here it is. All right, we'll be right back. Okay, so we're back. Fun stuff for dessert. So here's what's been going on. Trump has been avoiding doing a lot of interviews. He's just been doing like some friendly ones. He recently got into a position where 60 Minutes every year since like the 67 or 68 has hosted both presidential candidates to do a 60 Minutes interview. So it's an hour. It's tough questioning for the most part. Not super tough, but still tough questioning about your policies, what you're going to do. Kamala Harris did one. She did really well. They tried to do some gotcha stuff, and she handled it real well. Laid out her platform really good. Trump, on the other end, bailed. Said he wouldn't do it. He had a bunch of caveats, like they couldn't fact check him. Like, once again, the fact check. I have to be able to lie. You guys got to let me lie. And he wanted Leslie Stahl, who works for 60 Minutes, to apologize to him for something that she said in their 2020 interview, where he got all upset and left like 20 minutes into it, except for the fact that the thing he wants her to apologize for saying, she didn't say. It was something stupid. But here's Morning Joe. They're going to talk about it. Then we're going to skip to the interview he actually did do, which is basically what we've been waiting for all morning. So here it is. Here's Morning Joe first, and then we'll get to it. I'm going to wait just a little bit longer.
There are 28 days until Election Day. And last night, CBS aired its 60 Minutes interview with Kamala Harris. Now, the program has interviewed the candidates in every presidential election dating back to 1968. But Donald Trump backed out this year. And before airing the interview with Vice President Harris, 60 Minutes began with a note about Trump. Here's part of that explanation.
It's been a tradition for more than half a century that the major party candidates for president sit down with 60 Minutes in October. In 1968, it was Richard Nixon and Hubert Humphrey. This year, Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump accepted our invitation. But unfortunately, last week, Trump canceled. The campaign offered shifting explanations. First, it complained that we would fact-check the interview. We fact-check every story. Later, Trump said he needed an apology for his interview in 2020. Trump claims correspondent Leslie Stahl said in that interview that Hunter Biden's controversial laptop came from Russia. She never said that. Trump has said his opponent doesn't do interviews because she can't handle them. He had previously declined another debate with Harris, so tonight may have been the largest audience for the candidates between now and Election Day.
Which is true. He turned down his chance because the debate was, 65 million people watched the presidential debate between him and Kamala. And she, curb stomped him. It was great. This is a chance. Her one, I didn't see the actual numbers, but tens of millions of people watched her 60 Minutes interview. This was Trump's one last chance to really get in front of the public, and he didn't do it.
He should have wanted this one because this is one where he can have the limelight, and he literally actually doesn't have to go against her. Right. Clearly, she's going to come up, and some of her policies are going to come up, but he doesn't actually have to debate her. He does not have to sound better than her. He doesn't, you know what I mean? He could just absorb the spotlight and try to win over voters without her being so directly in his face.
Yeah, but the him having to lean over, and I think he fell off the stool at one point this last week during an interview, and the slurring is really bad, and he's not making any sense. I bet it's his campaign is look, the less people see of him, the less they're reminded of what a train wreck he is. So we just need to keep him under wraps as much as possible. However, they did let him do an interview with Dave Ramsey. If you don't know Dave Ramsey, if you're one of our new viewers, we ripped on Dave Ramsey for a lot. We're going to try and do some more of it because Dave Ramsey's retiring soon. Because Dave Ramsey's him and his company are facing a $150 million lawsuit for false advertising where a bunch of his viewers got ripped off from something he advertised and took money from. On top of that fact, he's also facing a suit for discrimination for firing a worker who disagreed with him on their COVID policies because it was a religious viewpoint. So basically he's retiring to try and avoid having to pay a lot of these lawsuits and tank the company. So he's being kind of forced into retirement, so he's doing this last interview with Trump. Now, for those of you who haven't seen the show, we used to do this thing called the cage match. And the whole point is we'd get these fake, guys on, finance guys, and we would basically try to predict what they were going to say, and then we just make fun of them and show you why they were wrong and stupid. Now, we're going to sort of do that here, so I'll play the intro now. I'll play the intro, and then we'll come back into it. Okay, so we'll come back in 3, 2, 1. Okay, so here it is. The cage match. Lacey and Duncan versus Dave Ramsey and Donald Trump. I'm so excited. I don't know how excited you are, Lace. Here we go. We're going to dive right in.
I got to tell you right now, I'm saying, are we trying to predict what Ramsey has to say or what Trump has to say or both?
I don't think we're going to be able to predict what they have to say. I did watch this already. Just for everybody's knowledge, Lacey hasn't seen all this yet. Okay.
And I have not, so it would be a blind prediction on my part. I think
what we're going to do is we're just going to show all the bullshit they say. We're just going to do that. Okay. That's the cage match.
All right, that's fair, because I don't know how to predict something with this whole loose cannon series here. I don't even know.
Oh, there's so many lies that go through this. This whole thing is just bullshit after bullshit. It's just a big pile of bullshit on top of bullshit. Nothing they say is true for the most part. So we'll go through it, but it's just insane.
Hey guys, Dave Ramsey here with The Ramsey Show. If you don't know what The Ramsey Show is, it's a show about life, about money, about relationships. It's not a show about politics. We specifically...
Okay, so that's a lie right there. He says political shit all the time.
And if anybody has any lefty types of opinions, he is very quick to say nasty things about them.
Right.
So I don't know. I mean, it's not on the surface trying to be a political show, but to pretend that they're trying to avoid politics would be not true.
Oh, they talk about politics all the time. We used to do a segment where they would talk about politics or economic things that were going on politically, and they'd pull out an article and they'd read the first paragraph but not read the rest of it. And so we did a segment called They Don't Read, or Why Won't They Read, where we would read the whole article and show that the article contradicts what their analysis was entirely.
But you have to finish reading the article.
Right, you have to read the second paragraph. So we'll jump into this in a second.
Over the years of
I'm going to play this at a little bit faster speed because otherwise we'll go insane. Because he's so slow.
I also, we can predict how much anxiety and trauma this is going to cause me. These are the two people most likely to make Lacey anxious, and they're all in one interview. So, woo, here we go.
Oh.
Here we go. And you know what, people? This is only club soda. It's not going to help at all.
Right. No, we really should have broke up the hard stuff for this one. But honestly, I think, Lacey, because I watched this whole thing, I think when you watch it, they are such pathetic, doddering old men. You're going to feel better about life.
Okay.
This is
just
sad. This is two grandpas whining about life.
Tried to remind you over and over again that what happens in your house is more important for your success than what happens in the White House. We also realize that this election is a really important time right now. The people are really looking at what's happening.
Okay. That's weird, too. What happens in the White House, what happens in government is not important. What's important is what's happening in your home, right? Except for we're doing this interview because this is actually really important and it affects you and your home. So it's just, it's all over the fucking map.
I have to say, this could be a really super weird, but maybe kind of amusing casting of a really right-wing version of, like, Grumpy Old Men.
Oh, it totally is. Oh, God.
Like Grumpy Old Republicans. I mean, like the two of them starring in their own weird little version of Grumpy Old Men.
Right. We should just call this the Parkinson's ward talk show, and it's really bad.
There's a real divisiveness in the air, a lot of anger in the air. So our team reached out to Vice President Harris's team about the opportunity to sit down with her for a long-form interview, and reached out to President Trump's team about the opportunity to sit down for a long-form interview with him, and to talk about ideas, talk about what's going to happen, not what has happened, and not about personalities and not about name-calling, because both sides are pretty good at all of that stuff. And the fact that I sit down with either one of these candidates is going to piss some of you off, and frankly, I'm perfectly fine with that. It's something I wanted to do, and I felt like it was something we needed to talk about. So I find myself sitting here in Trump Tower, getting ready to interview President Trump for a few minutes. I think you're going to find this really interesting. So President Trump...
You're not going to find it interesting. It's another lie. Go ahead.
Thanks for taking time to sit down with us.
Thank you.
Honored to be with you. Good to hang out with you. As you know, we do a show called The Ramsey Show and talk to regular folks every day, calling in most of the time with financial trouble, sometimes with financial victories, stuff we've taught them to do, the basic grandma's common sense stuff.
Right.
And that audience that's going to be watching this is, they're not concerned with a lot of things, but they are concerned with $8 eggs, $5 gas, 7% interest rates, and a house they can't afford with wages not going up as fast as house prices. Right. This inflation thing's a big deal. So in the first...
All right. We got to start right there. People are worried. $8 eggs, $5 gas, house prices going way up over wages, right? And the fact that inflation is horrible right now. Inflation is a big deal, right? All bullshit. In the first 20 seconds of the interview, Trump hasn't even spoke yet. And Dave's already fucked this whole thing up. So here we go. Let's look at gas prices. He said gas prices are $5. First off, let me do eggs. Eggs right now, the average price of a dozen eggs in the U.S. is around $3 in March of 2024. That's the average nationwide. Some places it's higher than others. And it also depends what kind of eggs you're buying. But that's higher than the previous year, which was like whatever. But it's lower than the peak of what it was last year in January of $4.82. So it's gone down. So that's horseshit. $8 eggs is only in certain places, not nationwide. So that's horseshit right there. Gas prices. Are gas prices through the roof? Let's see. Are they $5 like he said? No. Current average is $3.18.
Okay, while I'm probably likely to see $8 eggs in New York City, and I'm sorry for my major cities and Cali people there too, because they might be seeing them.
Honolulu,
but
yeah.
What's also super ironic to me is most of the places where he's going to get his votes and Ramsey's going to get his viewership are not the prices where you're going to find the $8 eggs. So that's the part that's extra ironic. And I'm also going to be honest, I see $8 eggs or close, but I also don't buy eggs that are not organic.
Right.
I'm totally buying the more expensive eggs.
Right.
I don't know how much I would pay for the not organic kind. It's still more expensive in here.
Well, yeah, my eggs are more expensive too, but I don't buy the regular grade A, eggs like most people do. But that's what they're basing that on. But let's look at gas. So gas is down to $3.18. It was at the peak, the highest recorded at $5 back in 2022, but it's gone down since then by almost $2 a gallon, which is big. And if you look at a year ago, it was $3.71 almost. So it's gone down, 50 cents, over 50 cents just in the last year. So that's huge. So this is current average on the left to a year ago. So it's been coming down. So this $5 gas shit, that's already bullshit there too. Talking about interest rates being over 7%. Interest rates were over 7.35 during COVID, back in May of 2024. But now the Fed's lowered rates, and now interest rates are hovering around 6.25. So it's coming down. So this is improving. He's making it sound like it's getting worse, but it's improving. The one thing he is sort of right about, but sort of wrong, was home prices have outpaced paychecks. But that's been the case for decades now. So this goes back to 1990 for this NPR article, where they show that the price of homes have outpriced income ratio quite a bit. And this has been just this sort of, this map, as you see, it's scrolling through time. It gets darker red as the income ratio, the price of your house to your income ratio has gone up over the years. But that's a 35-year trend. That's not a new thing. And a lot of that has to do with basically flat wage growth for a long time. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that after the 2008 crisis, a lot of people, even prior to that, only invested in more expensive homes. The $400,000 or $300,000 house, or $250,000 starter house, or $200,000 house, not a lot of those anymore. So it's hard to get people into the market because they can't afford the $600,000 house right out of the gate. They're not making enough homes. There's a home shortage, which this article kind of points out here. Housing experts say there aren't enough homes in the U.S. And they talk about finding an affordable place to live in the U.S. can feel pretty impossible, whether you're a renter or a buyer. To begin with, there's a massive shortage of homes, somewhere between 4 to 7 million shortage of homes. And those who are able to find homes are spending much bigger chunks of their paycheck than in recent years. So they talk about that in this article here on NPR, which was a follow-up article, which is an interview. But so that's what's causing that. So it's not something a president can really do a whole shitload about. Now, they can do something like Kamala Harris is talking about, which is we're going to cap rent prices nationally. So you can't raise rents by so much. That'll bring down prices quite a bit. Because right now, let's say your average, and we've looked this up plenty of times, your average rent's $1,600 a month. Well, if I'm selling a house, it's like, $1,600 a month, that's the floor. So now my $250 piece of shit house, I'm going to charge $350 for, because that's about the same as renting a one-bedroom apartment. Or I'm going to charge a little bit more. But if you cap how much rents can grow, then that levels that out a little bit more. But as Lacey's pointed out many times in previous episodes, there were times back in the early 2000s and 2010s where you'd turn around and your rent was doubled. Or it went up 50%.
It was insane. It didn't happen to me, but I was aware that it was happening in the Portland metropolitan area.
All over the
I was hearing people talking about it. Well, I'm particularly quoting there because it's also where I have property. And I was like, what? My people aren't doing anything like that. What craziness is going on over there? But people were looking around and their landlord was like doubling things on them.
Right. But here's the thing I want to get to the crux of. This is what the real issue is through all that. it's wage growth versus inflation. And inflation peaked out here. This is inflation versus wages, but inflation was at 9.1. But wage growth had gone up. It used to be about 3.5. Now it's up to about 4. And at one point it was up to 6, but it's now about 4.5%. But inflation is 2.5. So just in the last, since about February, April, probably April of, no, it's February, sorry, of 2023, in the last, since then, a year plus, wage growth has outpaced inflation. Now, not everybody's going to feel the real impact of that yet because they haven't caught up, because for a long time it wasn't like that. And especially into the Trump years, it wasn't like that, and under the Obama years and Bush and whatnot. Inflation outpaced wage growth. So now that we're starting to see that more consistently, and the Fed is more interested in that, you'll see improvements, but it's going to take time. But the whole point is things are improving. So all these things that he's bringing up as issues are bullshit. And we'll look at Trump's little bullshit answer to it real quick, but because it is a bullshit answer.
First 90 days, the strokes that you make to change the economy when you're elected are a big deal. What's the first things you're going to do on that?
Well, in terms of inflation, you're right. And it's almost inflation over the economy, if you want to really know, because people are getting wiped out like never before. I think it's the highest inflation we've ever had. They say it's the highest in 48 years. I think
it's gone down quite a bit.
Okay, let's just stop and also point out how funny and ironic this pairing is because, Trump refuses to go on any interviews where he will be fact-checked, and Ramsey Network does absolutely no fact-checking. And when they quote sources for their own facts, they don't actually finish reading the article. So half the time, the facts they're pointing out, if they would actually go and read the rest of the article and give it the context, wouldn't actually even be facts at all.
Right. So that's the whole thing. So this whole interview is just bullshit on top of bullshit. Ramsey feeds some bullshit, and then Trump bullshits back. But if you watch the whole thing, you can tell Ramsey gets uncomfortable because Trump doesn't ever answer, even though he's feeding him all this just meat, this red meat to chew on. It's all lies in his favor. Trump still can't take advantage of it.
Truly, this should be the best interview of his life because Ramsey is going to set him up with every single question to hit it out of the ballpark. However, let's also be honest that an interview with Ramsey from Trump is not exactly like a huge political win. Even if Trump does knock it out of the ballpark, the Ramsey viewers are already like probably 95% going to vote for Trump anyway. Like he's got the very Christian conservative base,
right,
is Ramsey's base. These are the Trump voters. So this isn't going to sway anything in Trump's direction,
no.
Even if he can totally hit a home run off of what's literally being just lobbed directly to him.
That's the point, and you hit it now. The few 100,000 people that were going to view this, or maybe a million people that are going to view this, or view as it gets, whatever it is, like you said, most of them are Dave Ramsey viewers. They're already in the tank for Trump. The only ones who are going to watch this that aren't are going to be people like us who think it's funny because it's so pathetic.
And they're already very clearly not going to be voting
We're
for
already
him.
voting for Harris. Yeah. So
right.
This was just Trump wanted to go to an interview and they said, okay, this is the safest one. We don't want him going anywhere too public though, because then America will see what a nut he is. But this is just stupid.
I think it's the highest ever. There's never been any mess like this, and it's because of what they did with energy. Also, then they topped it with spending with money, that trillions and trillions of dollars that they didn't need, that's being just wasted.
Yeah. It's bullshit. Trump spent $8 trillion as president. He broke the record. Brought in the least amount of government revenue for years. And spent the most money, ran up the debt and the deficit, just through the roof. Biden slowly brought it down, even with the Inflation Reduction Act. Biden spent less. And Biden had to get us out of a pandemic that Trump didn't do shit about. I mean, so that's the issue with that. On top of the fact, the energy thing is he keeps pushing that. We got to do more energy, more drilling. And he'll say that right here. We'll get into it, but it's just stupid.
But the first thing you have to do is get the energy down. If you get the energy down, other things are going to follow. You want to get the interest rates down too. And interestingly, even interest rates are going to follow energy because it's going to take that burden off the shoulders of the economy and off the shoulders of inflation itself. And we are going to drill at a level that you haven't seen since, let's say, 4 or 5 years ago, but even more so. We would have been so dominant by this point. If you remember, when you go back to the beginning of this really failed administration that we're in right now, what they did was they turned off the energy. They turned off everything that I had
So you
built.
turn back on the Keystone. You're going to turn back on the drill baby drill line and the...
Okay, first up, this is all horse shit. Second off, Dave Ramsey's response, you're going to turn back on the Keystone. So Keystone Pipeline pumps oil from Canada and to Canada, right? Now, if you open up that pipeline, it doesn't create more oil. Right? I have a water bottle. If I open the lid, I don't create more liquid in the water bottle. The lid being the pipe. Opening up a pipe doesn't make more fucking oil.
I mean, you could change the location of what was in there, but you're not making more.
No. And furthermore, you're just going to tear up a bunch of people's lands and Native American lands for what? You're not going to improve profits or anything. Well, you are for certain groups of people, but not for the country. It's not going to generate shit. The other thing about this energy thing is it's all horseshit anyway. And of course, Dave, we know, doesn't ever do fact-checking on anything. U.S. energy outputs. Here we go. So, this is just the U.S. Energy Information Administration. They talk about how much we use and where and the different distribution of it. But here it is. Energy outputs in the U.S. These are all the different natural gas, petroleum, renewable, coal, nuclear, electric. You notice how there's a trend here since the 1950s where it's gone up? Now you notice after Obama, it went up quite a bit. And then it kind of tanked here in 2015, 2016, then came back up again, and then COVID hit, and then it's, oh my gosh, it's at record highs now. We're producing more oil, more energy now than we ever have. We're a net exporter. And because we're doing that, that's what's keeping the gas prices down. It's artificial. So when we had that sort of shortage after COVID because of the supply chain issue where we couldn't get oil as easily, what did Biden do? He opened up the Federal Reserve, brought down the price of oil and gas from the peak by opening up the Federal Reserve of gasoline and oil, pumped that out, gave it to the consumers, then refilled it when the prices were low. So the government sold it high and bought it back low. So the government made a profit by bringing down the price of gas and oil for the rest of us. And Trump's bitching about, oh, well, if we just solve the energy problem, this horrible, horrible energy deficit we're facing here on the far right of this graph, that is the opposite of what he's saying. Somehow that's going to bring down inflation. Inflation's already down, energy's already up. So he's just, it's all horseshit. And Dave Ramsey's just, oh yeah, Keystone, which won't make a difference. Won't make a single difference. So it's all just horseshit, on and on. But I wanted to get to this last clip and we'll wrap up. We were making fun of Patrick Bet-David recently. And he did this whole thing about he's ranting against income taxes and ranting against wealth taxes that Kamala Harris is promoting. But part of what he did was he did this whole thing about, you know, America was better off when we didn't have income tax in the 19th century. And we were richer and all this stuff. And it was a stupid thing to say, and it wasn't true. But watching this, it was revelatory. I'm like, where does he get this horse shit? Because it's not true. It's ahistorical. They're trying to rewrite history in order to justify saying, well, no, we should cut all progressive taxes that tax wealthier people and just do regressive taxes and tax the middle class and the poor. So the bottom 70% of us should pay all the taxes, and the top 30 shouldn't pay anything. That was kind of the spin. Where did Patrick Bet-David get it? I don't know, but probably from the same place that Trump got it, because he says the same thing in this interview. And it's like they're just regurgitating these weird conspiracy talking points they get from odd places. So this is about halfway through the interview. He starts on this, and it's just insane. And Dave Ramsey just nods
So
along.
much fighting with politicians on using it. I saved our steel industries by putting tariffs on steel that China came in and dumped. And you know what they do? They dump and dump and dump. Everybody goes out of business. Then they buy those businesses.
So here's what happened, too. So when he raised the tariff on steel, it forced us to buy steel locally, right? And that's what a lot of companies did. They didn't buy it from China. What they did do is a lot of them switched to buying it from, like, Vietnam, Taiwan, other countries that had it, right? However, it did increase the amount of steel production purchased in the United States, which is great if you're a steel production company in the United States, because now you can jack up your prices a little bit more because the tariffs make the other shit more expensive. It sucks if you're any other business that uses steel, because now your overhead just went up. Which sucks because now you've got to raise prices to make the difference, which means you and me and everybody else have to pay more money for any products that have any steel in it. So it ended up bleeding out the American consumer quite a bit. So that's horseshit right there.
This is very cheap, and then they raise the prices to higher than they ever were. That's one of the many benefits that they have if they want.
And he just admitted they raised the prices to higher because they could get away with it. Because by raising the tariff, he limited cheaper competition.
To do it, but by putting tariffs on, as an example, in the furniture business in North Carolina, it was so vibrant, and they stole our business. And they charge us, if you wanted to build a furniture place, if you want to sell your furniture in China, they won't take it. But if you want to build a plant in China to make furniture in China using their labor, they open it. We're doing the same thing. But a lot of people are, oh, well, we don't want to have tariffs. The country.
Okay, so here's what happened with that, because that's horseshit too. I mean, this is all just, it would take us days to unravel all the bullshit in this. So that's why we're only doing a couple clips. Here's what happens. Here is Furniture Today. Literally a website doing articles about furniture. China, data and industry agrees its furniture presence is in steep decline. So it is. Okay, so so it talk about there was a moment in time, years actually, when sourcing furniture was easy, no matter what you needed, be it upholstery, solid wood, case goods, metal, laminate, etc. It could all be sourced from China. But then came a series of hurdles. First were duties on bedroom furniture, and then Trump-era tariffs and worsening political tension with the U.S. Now, China's trajectory as a furniture exporter to the U.S. is in clear, substantial decline. So yeah, they did lose because of the tariffs. Because a lot of people just bought it locally because it was cheaper. It's the same thing with the steel, right? So that's the whole point of the tariff thing. You're not going to raise money because we're not going to pay the tariff. We're just going to buy it locally to try and save some money. But we're actually paying more now than we were before. But that's just the deal. So you're not paying the tariff anyway. On the data side, China furniture exports to the U.S. are down nearly 35%. Wow, that's a lot. So they're not exporting as much furniture from 2019. That's in sharp contrast to its two closest rivals, Vietnam and Mexico, which sit at 40.6% and 65.2% growth respectively. So what did the China tariffs do? Did they start buying more local furniture? Some maybe, but mostly they said, well, we can't buy it from China anymore, it's too expensive. What about Vietnam and Mexico? So you didn't bring in any fucking money from the tariffs, and we still didn't create any jobs or help anything here, because as a furniture company, do I want to buy it here for more money, or do I want to go to Vietnam? Or Mexico?
So that was effective.
So it didn't do shit. This is all stupid. Did it help tank the Chinese furniture industry? Yeah, but also the Europeans started doing shit like that too. And it's not because they were trying to raise money on tariffs, it's because they were trying to strangle China a little bit. because China's becoming kind of a world threat. So that was what that whole thing was about. So he's got nothing here, man. But let him get to the real fucking meat of what they're talking about. Because this is the Project 2025 conspiracy shit that Patrick Bet-David was pushing and all the others were. But this is sort of where he's pushing it to. And this is where they're pushing their rich person grab.
Country was at the richest point in its history in the 1890s. It was all tariffs. If you
Go back to that real quick.
Open it. We're doing the same thing. But a lot of people are, oh, well, we don't want to have tariffs. The country was at the richest point in its history in the 1890s. It was all tariffs. If you looked at William McKinley as an example, he was a big tariff president. They had committees that were put in charge of what to do with the money. We were taking in so much money. And McKinley would say, why should we let other people come in and steal our factories and steal our workers and steal our jobs? And why shouldn't we benefit? And he tariffed the other countries. And we...
All right, so this is the scam. All right, they're saying in 1890, the end of the 19th century, was when America was the wealthiest it's ever been. What does that mean, though? When he says that, he means there were the most wealthy people per capita. Like millionaires per capita. Millionaires back then would have been billionaires today, right? Per capita back then. What he's ignoring is what was happening in the 1890s. The Industrial Revolution. And what ended up happening? Huge wealth inequality, income inequality. This is before the 5-day work week and the 8-hour work day. This is before sick leave. This is when you could work workers to death for no money. Mass homelessness, especially from the elderly. This is what led to...
Literally to death. Literally to death.
This is what caused the Great Depression. This sort of thinking, this sort of mention. And the reason the government had set it up that way, and I covered this in the Patrick Bet-David one, was historically that was all the government did was tariffs and stuff, but the federal government didn't charge taxes. It says in Article 1 of the Constitution that the states charge taxes and then they pay the federal government. The federal government didn't collect taxes back then. That changed when they did the 16th Amendment in 1913. The reason was because with the Industrial Revolution, you had to have roads and electricity and all this shit, which the government had to pay for, and the states were overtaxed. So the federal government created an income tax to try and alleviate all that. And prior to that, the government didn't provide much in the way of services, like bridges and roads, electricity. Now we have internet, sewage. I mean, this is police, fire, garbage pickup. I mean, all this provided by federal and state governments. So they restructured all that and had to collect more tax. So revenue right now to GDP, tax revenue to GDP, it's down. It's 16%. All right? So 16% or taxes are 16%. Tax revenue the government collects is 16% of the gross domestic product currently, right? So it's usually around 18 to 20, but it's 16 now. It's lower because of the Trump tax cuts and all that shit. Now, what was government revenue to GDP in 1890? In the late 19th century, it was like 2%. So how is tariffs going to raise more money for the government? If he's saying the government was so wealthy because of tariffs and consumption tax was all they had back then, and they were only raising 2% of GDP. But that's the myth. But see, the whole thing is they want to cut government spending, increase taxes on the middle and lower classes, on the bottom, 80, 90%, 70% of people, right? So they can keep all their money. What they're talking about is going back to a medieval system where the rich collected everything and the poor paid everything. That's what this scam is. That's the whole part of the whole Project 2025, is they want to do that kind of rule again, where they're like untouchable royalty and we're all just peasants. And we should be grateful because they'll own everything. And that's the whole scam here. So that's my pitch on the cage match. But Dave Ramsey, man, just sitting here nodding along like a dipshit.
Well, here's the thing, though. God, I'm about to defend Dave Ramsey. Put it on your calendar, people. But in his position, I don't know what else he can do. Because, A, he wouldn't be knowledgeable in the way to be, you know, to know enough to be able to debunk things. But he's also... He's trying to lob him this ball he can get a home run with. He wants him to hit the home run. And when he doesn't, and he starts saying a bunch of junk anyway, he can't exactly call him out for not answering.
Right.
Or try to correct him without making him look like an idiot. And he's not going to interview the other candidate. His whole goal is to try to propel him forward, so he kind of just has to sit there and go, you know?
Well, what's sad about this whole thing is Dave cuts this whole interview short at 20 minutes. Because Trump's just rambling and not making any sense, yeah.
So it kind of seems like he just like is cutting it short.
And just gave up, yeah.
Yeah.
Because Trump doesn't look good. He's rambling, he's not making a lot of sense. You would have to be like somebody like me who's been following all this right-wing nonsense and these financial conspiracies where they're really trying to get out of paying taxes for the rich. You'd have to know that.
Well,
you'd have to do research. Dave Ramsey,
also,
he's down the rabbit hole, but not that far.
If you look at the title of this, Can Trump's Plan Clean Up America's Financial Mess? Which is really what Ramsey Network is, you know, trying to be about, right? But regardless of whether it's true or not, Trump's not even staying within the frame of the conversation. He's not really saying if he can clean up America's financial mess. He's kind of like bobbing and weaving all over the place. So it's not surprising that Ramsey would want to cut this short, because it's like, it's not even really addressing in a broad strokes way the topic, really.
And it makes Trump is just rambling and whatnot. Like you said, he has to agree with him, but Trump's not addressing the issue. What are you going to do to make things better for lower people? You just say, well, I'm going to extend the tax cuts. That would have been the fucking perfect home run answer. So your taxes aren't going to go up. For Dave's audience, that would have been the home run answer. Doesn't solve anything in the long run, but that's what they want to hear. Right? But Trump doesn't have anything like that. He doesn't have any plans. He doesn't have any strategy. There's nothing going on. It's just ramble. So he spent half of this talking about immigration. Which Dave Ramsey doesn't know shit about or care about. Except for the, you know, immigrants he probably hires. But, yeah. And Dave cut it short. I mean, think about it. He begged for both of them to interview. Kamala Harris's people said, okay, we'll think about it, which means no. It's not going to do her any good. Trump agreed, probably because they don't have anything else going on for him, and they wanted to give him an easy one. And then he got there, and it's like, boom, Dave, you got this interview, and you cut it short at 20 minutes?
Well, I mean, from the Ramsey perspective, though, Ramsey's whole thing is, you know, cleaning up America's financial mess. And that's can be broad, very, very broad, but all Trump really has to do is talk about how he's sticking money into the people's wallets. If he can loop it in any way back to that, it's a home run. And it's what Ramsey Network is looking for, and Trump just can't manage to do it.
Right. And Trump, you know, and Dave's just sitting there sucking him off the whole time. And you can tell after a while, Dave just gets tired.
Well, it's because it's not doing for Dave what it needs to do for Dave, and Dave's hands are kind of tied.
Yeah.
He can't correct him.
Mm-hmm.
He can't seem too obvious, like he's trying to answer the question for him to try to steer it on track. Like, his hands are a little tied, so the best he can do is just go.
Well, plus I think in Dave's, because Dave ramps him up on his show, and I think in Dave's mind, Trump is a lot more capable and smarter and swifter on his feet, and then he gets there in front of him, and I think he's just, I mean, look at the face he's making here. I mean, he makes this face through the whole fucking thing. Where he just like, huh? What? What do we, okay? What? I mean, it's just crazy. I mean, and Trump just rambles and rambles and rambles.
Well, it kind of looks like Ramsey's sort of trying to figure out where he's going with this. If he's going somewhere that steers back to the overarching purpose of this interview, you know?
But Ramsey's the same way. Ramsey won't do interviews unless they're favorable. Neither one of these guys wants to go up against anyone who's going to challenge them.
Right.
They just want the softball. And here was a great softball interview, and he couldn't even fucking make contact. And Dave just gave up after 20 minutes. Like, fucking, if we're not getting anywhere now, I'm not going to help him out at all. And in fact, he's just looking crazier and crazier to my viewers because he's talking about just this weird shit that none of them are going to understand or care about.
Quite frankly, the people are going to zone out when he starts talking about tariffs because people only have the vaguest, most general idea about what that means. Mm-hmm. And I don't think anyone thinks that when they hear the word tariff, it's suddenly going to mean they have more money. I don't think anybody, is even piecing anything together that looks like this means I have more money. So Trump starts going off on tariffs and they go, oh my God, that's that over there, whatever. That doesn't feel like that has anything to do with their wallet to them, you know? So they're like,
well, for
zoning out.
For Dave's audience, it could be, well, I want to cut back on regulation and expand, small. Even Dave feeds him a small business question and expand small business and get more people hiring and I'm going to do this and make it possible for everybody to pull them up by their bootstraps and live the American dream. He could just spew that rhetoric, which is all horseshit, and Dave's audience would eat it up. But he can't even do that.
Sure, and throw in some more stuff about, wage growth and when was the last time you got a raise with your boss? Well, we're going to take care of that and it could even be nonsense, but it would at least feel to the people like, oh my wallet.
Right. But that's the thing is Dave set this up. Trump, you need to talk to my people. And Trump can only talk to his base, and his base is just racist. So it's all immigration, tariff shit, anti-China, Trump cannot leave that neo-Nazi sphere. That's where it just unravels for Dave, because it's like, all you've done is whine about brown people for 20 minutes. You haven't talked to the white Christians that are listening to my show. So, anyway, that was all stupid. I mean, it's all fucking lies. I mean, so it was an easy cage match for us, because it's just horseshit on horseshit. But anyway, I don't know if you had any final thoughts.
I don't even know how you evaluate it. We usually go on and say we either won or tied or lost or whatever. But I don't even know how we evaluate this one except to say that they were all full of nonsense.
That was just all full of nonsense. Yeah, it's kind of like, it's funny because it's like getting into a cage fight and the other person thinks they're showing up to, a ballet. I mean, who won?
Right. That's why I'm saying I want to declare us the winner, but I'm not even sure what the point system would be here because it was like they showed up cookies when we were going for a cage match, so I don't know.
Right.
I don't.
They were like, I thought this was a bake-off.
We're like, we're not even. I don't know.
Yeah. Anyway, that's kind of our show for today. Thanks everybody for joining us. Where can everybody catch you, Lacey?
As always, you can catch me at mysensewithsense.com. Find out information about courses, workshops, and articles that I've written. If you have questions about any of those things, or if you manage to find something else fun and exciting like this you think we should be talking about, send it to us via email. And Duncan, where can they do that?
Yeah, you can email us at gossipfinancead@outlook.com. It's down below. Yeah, if you want to argue with us, invite yourself on the show. We'd love to have somebody on. For you Patrick Bet David fans, we'd love to spar with you over some of this if you guys are interested. Let us know. We're available. Once again, thanks everybody for watching, and we'll catch you next time. Let's see.
Bye.